In the 3rd year of his marriage to Victoria, their marriage certificate accidentally got soaked by coffee. Larry took the document to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get a replacement. After typing a few keys on the computer, the staff member suddenly looked up at him. "Sir, your marital status shows as single." He was stunned for a moment, thinking he misheard. "That can't be. My wife and I got our certificate here 3 years ago." The staff checked again and her expression turned a bit strange. "The system shows you are indeed single, but Miss Victoria is married." She paused. "Her spouse is listed as another gentleman named Henry. Do you know him?" Larry's mind exploded with a buzzing sound, leaving only sharp tinnitus in his ears. Everyone knew Larry and Victoria were childhood sweethearts. He was the love of her life, the one she secretly admired when she was young. And Henry was a substitute Victoria found during the 2 years Larry was studying abroad because she missed him too much. Larry held the soggy fake marriage certificate in a daze and got into his car. Suddenly, his phone vibrated twice, and a message from Victoria popped up. "Honey, I skipped out on a $1 billion deal and bought your favorite roses and shrimp dumplings. I miss you so much. Do you miss me?" He stared at the message, then suddenly laughed out loud. As he laughed, tears rolled down his cheeks. For 3 years, she asked him this question every day, expressing her love for him. But it turns out she was already legally married to someone else behind his back. He remembered when he was little, falling sick and not going to kindergarten, and how Victoria cried and refused to go to school without him, insisting on staying to take care of him when he had a fever. She said, "I'm scared to be alone without you." And on his 15th birthday, she waited outside his building in the rain all night just to be the first to wish him happy birthday when he woke up. He recalled their 18th birthday party when she had a surprise ready, hugging him under fireworks saying, "Larry, wait till I'm 22 and let's get married, okay?" He remembered when he went abroad to study. She hugged him with teary eyes, voice trembling. 2 years. I'll give you only 2 years. When the time's up, I'll come to bring you back." Those 2 years abroad, they almost video called every day. One time he was busy with a paper and didn't answer her calls for 3 days. When he got back in touch, he found out she was hospitalized for depression. Her eyes were red in the video. "Baby, I can't live without you." He always comforted her. "I'll be back soon. Just wait a little longer." On the day he returned, he didn't tell Victoria, wanting to surprise her. But he opened the room door and saw her passionately kissing a boy in his arms. That boy's profile looked about 70% like his. The bouquet he was holding fell to the floor with a thud as he turned and left. Victoria chased in a frenzy. He didn't answer her calls, so she kept sending messages. He refused to meet her, so she stood in the rain below his building, explaining repeatedly, "It's not what you think. These years you wouldn't let me visit you. I missed you so much I found a substitute. I swear, it was just hugging and kissing. Nothing else. Larry, I was wrong, but I really love you like crazy." In the end, she stood in the rain for 3 days and nights, got pneumonia, and fainted. Even in the hospital, she refused to leave until he softened and forgave her. Afterwards, she treated him the way she always did. Until after they got married, he noticed her assistant was now Henry, the substitute she said she sent away. She explained again, his parents aren't well, and he's not well suited for anywhere else, so he asked to return to the capital. He interviewed for my assistant. I had no idea. He's capable and went through a rigorous selection process. I can't just fire him, so he tolerated it once more. He never thought that by enduring, he'd turn himself into a colossal joke. When the car drove into the Villa district, Larry had already figured it all out. He took a deep breath, ready to go inside, when he heard Victoria and her friend's conversation from the living room. "I just went to the hospital. Henry's fine, just some bruises. You can stay home with Larry," her friend said. Victoria leaned back on the couch, long legs crossed. She frowned and put out the cigarette in her friend's hand, her voice cool. "How many times have I told you? No smoking in my house. Larry doesn't like the smell." All right, you're such a husband lover." Her friend teased with a laugh, "But I really don't get it. You clearly love Larry so much. Why did you marry Henry back then?" Tell me, do you see Henry as more than just a stand-in? There was a few seconds of silence. Then, Victoria's muffled voice came. So what if I do? I used to think he was just a stand-in, that once Larry came back, I wouldn't need him anymore. But after he was sent away, I started dreaming of him nearly every night. Eventually, I couldn't stand him not being around, so I brought him back to stay as an assistant. I can't live without Larry, but Henry, I also can't let go. Larry can be my husband out in the open, Henry has to stay in the shadows, and giving him a title as compensation, so what? Her friend sighed. Aren't you afraid Larry might find out? With his temperament, if he knows, even if you die in front of him, he won't turn back. Victoria was silent for a moment, her gaze deepening. Then I'll just make sure he never finds out. Standing outside the door, Larry felt like all the blood in his body had turned to ice. He thought he would break down and demand an explanation, yet found even opening his mouth difficult. Turns out this is what ultimate pain feels like a chunk of his heart has been gouged out, yet it's still beating. He thought of how Victoria, just this morning before leaving, had stood on tiptoes to kiss his forehead. Thought of how every time she got drunk at social events, she'd collapse into his arms murmuring, "Husband, I can't live without you." Thought of how she'd warm his cold hands by holding them to her heart, saying, "It beats only for you." Turned out to all be lies. On the way back home, he even wondered if she had some hidden reason for her actions. Now he knew she simply fell for both of them. She never wanted to choose. One was the love of her life, the other her passionate affair. Fine. Victoria was afraid he'd know, so he'd let her experience what truly never looking back means. Turning away, he walked away and did two things. First, he applied to cancel all his domestic identities. Second, he changed his name. An official told him that all the paperwork would be completed within 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, no matter how hard she tried, Victoria wouldn't be able to find him. Larry turned and left. His phone buzzed relentlessly in his bag with all of Victoria's missed calls and messages. He didn't check them, nor did he respond. By the time he got home, it was already dark. Victoria was standing in the living room. As soon as she saw him, she hurried over, clearly worried. "Honey, where were you? I came back and you weren't here. I waited for hours, almost searched the whole city to find you." Her concern seemed real. Larry stared at her, feeling like an invisible hand was squeezing his heart hard. He suddenly remembered back in high school, when she was supposed to be at a math competition. He was late by just an hour replying to her, and she quit the competition to find him, scared something had happened to him. She loved him so much, yet that love wasn't unique. His throat felt tight, even breathing was slightly painful. But in the end, he calmly said, "I went out to get something. Forgot to tell you. Sorry." Victoria finally sighed with relief and hugged him. "Why are you apologizing?" "I'm not mad, just worried." She kissed his cheek softly. "All right, honey, didn't you say you wanted sweet and sour ribs and steamed base the day before yesterday? I'll make it for you, okay?" With that, she let him go and headed into the kitchen. Larry stood at the doorway, quietly watching Victoria. The cuffs of her shirt were rolled up, and her long fingers skillfully chopped the vegetables. Her profile looked especially gentle under the warm yellow light. He suddenly remembered 3 years ago when he had just returned from abroad. Due to irregular eating habits, he ended up with a severe stomach issue that hospitalized him. Back then, Victoria, a billionaire CEO who'd never cooked a day in her life, spent a month learning culinary skills from a top chef. Once, an international video conference coincided with dinner time. She conducted the meeting from the kitchen while cooking, leaving the executives dumbfounded. She loved him like that once. But at that moment, her phone rang. Larry saw her glance at the screen, her expression changing slightly. She quickly set down the knife and wiped her hands. "Honey, there's something urgent at the company. I need to go." She untied her apron, her tone normal. She even kissed his forehead on tiptoe. "I've made 3 dishes already, you should eat. No need to wait for me." Larry nodded silently. After she left, he went to the dining table, looking at the dishes still steaming, feeling a sudden ache in his heart like it was hard to breathe. He had just recognized the caller. It was Henry. Instead of sitting to eat as she wished, He went out, called a cab, and followed. Sure enough, Victoria didn't go to the company. She went to the hospital. In the VIP ward hallway, the entire floor was cleared. Just a few doctors and nurses in white coats stood nervously by the ward door. The hospital director bent over, apologizing profusely. "Victoria, I'm really sorry. We didn't take good care of Henry, and he slipped in the bathroom. We'll definitely assign more staff and ensure this never happens again." Victoria's face was gloomy, her voice cold as ice. "If there's a next time, you might as well close this hospital." The director nodded repeatedly. Yes, we understand." Larry stood at the corner, his fingertips digging into his palm. Her friend had mentioned Henry only had a minor scrape. But seeing her book the entire floor and get so uptight over a minor incident like she was ready to turn the hospital upside down. The ward door opened, revealing Henry weakly leaning against the bedhead, looking pale. Victoria quickly went over, holding his hand. "How are you feeling? Anywhere else hurt?" Henry clasped her hand, looking up at her pitifully like a puppy. "I'm sorry. I was so careless. Getting hit by a car is bad enough. Then slipping in the shower too, making you too busy to be with Larry. What if he overthinks? It's all my fault. What nonsense are you talking?" She gently scolded, but her tone was tender. "Focus on getting better. I'll be here with you these next few days." Henry gazed up at her with watery eyes. "What about Larry?" Victoria replied softly, "I'll handle it. You don't need to worry." After a pause, she added, "We're married. Isn't it natural for me to be here with you?" Larry's blood froze instantly. "Married," she said, "married." Before he could process it, he saw Victoria take off a bracelet and place it gently on Henry's wrist. "And stop calling yourself a jinx. This bracelet's been blessed. I've worn it for 7 years. Now it's yours to keep you safe and sound." With tears of gratitude, Henry hugged her. Standing outside, Larry's vision blurred, feeling like he might drown in deep waters. That bracelet was something he had acquired at 18 by kneeling every 3 steps and kowtowing every 9, all the way from the mountain base to the temple summit. It had rained heavily that day. His knees bled, his palms were scraped, but he finally got the monastery chief's blessing. When he came back, Victoria saw him in his sorry state and her eyes turned red instantly. Pulling him into her arms, her voice trembling, "Larry, are you crazy? Who told you to suffer like this?" He smiled and put the prayer beads on her wrist. The abbot said, "These beads will keep you safe and grant you a long life." She gently kissed him, saying, "I'll wear it forever." For the next 7 years, she truly never took them off. Even at the most formal business occasions, even in the most private moments, those beads were always around her wrist. But now, she placed them on another man's wrist with her own hands. Her heart felt like it was being cut open with a dull knife, and she could barely breathe from the pain. Turns out, her forever lasted only 7 years. He turned and walked away, his steps unsteady as if he were walking on cotton. By the time he got home, it was already late. As soon as he walked in, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Victoria. "Han, something came up at the office. I need to go abroad for a few days. Don't be mad. I'll make it up to you when I'm back." Larry stared at the screen, his fingers trembling above the keyboard. He typed one line, "A few days away on a business trip or with your husband." But in the end, he deleted it word by word, tears blurring his vision as they fell on the screen. After that, he started packing his suitcase. ID, passport, credit cards, everything that proved who he was went into the suitcase. 3 days later, Victoria came back. She opened the door with a big bouquet of roses in one hand and shrimp dumplings in the other. Smiling gently, "Honey, I'm back." Larry stood silently in the middle of the living room, watching her. She walked over, placed the flowers and dumplings on the table, and reached out to hug him. "The work stuff was so hectic. I had no choice but to go abroad. Otherwise, I wouldn't have left you for so long. Please don't be mad. Okay?" He shifted slightly, avoiding her hug, his tone calm. "Not mad. Just take care of your business." She paused, then laughed softly. "Not busy anymore. Everything's done. Now my job is to cheer you up." She took his hand, her eyes full of anticipation. "I prepared a surprise for you." Before he could respond, she pulled him into the car. Half an hour later, the car stopped in front of a music hall. Larry walked in, realizing the entire hall had been booked for them. The room was full of people, murmuring as they entered. Victoria really went all out, renting the whole hall for Larry. "I heard she flew in his favorite orchestra. They're playing just for him all day. That orchestra's booking fees have skyrocketed. This gig must have cost at least $1 billion. That's nothing. Everyone knows Victoria loves spoiling her husband." Larry stood under the dazzling lights, surrounded by admiring whispers, facing Victoria's gentle smile. But inside, his heart felt like it was soaking in ice water, cold and aching. She gave him grand romance, but gave her vows to another man. She let him live under the admiring gazes of others, but let another man live in her marriage license. Larry sat in a VIP seat in the music hall, surrounded by beautiful music and Victoria's gentle smile. She adjusted his scarf slightly, asking softly, "Are you cold?" He shook his head, instinctively frowning as a pain twisted in his stomach. Victoria noticed right away. "Is your stomach hurting again?" Feeling unwell, he nodded slightly. She placed her small hand on his stomach, sounding apologetic. "Is it bad? Should we head home?" Larry shook his head. Unable to persuade him, Victoria had her assistant send over some stomach medicine. In the meantime, all her attention was on him, frequently asking if he was okay or needed hot water or a blanket, as if he were still the one she loved most. Half an hour later, someone hurried over, calling softly, "Victoria, I've got the things you asked for." Larry and Victoria turned to see who it was. It was Henry. He held a paper bag in his hand, his hair slightly wet, his face a bit pale. Victoria's expression changed instantly. "You just got better. Who told you to come? Wasn't I expecting Tim?" Henry bit his lip, his voice raspy. "Assistant Lynn is discussing a project. I was worried Larry was in pain and that you were anxious, so I came myself." As he spoke, he carefully passed the paper bag over, adding, "It's raining out, and I forgot an umbrella, but don't worry. I kept everything dry." Victoria's expression shifted several times before she accepted the bag and handed it to Larry. "I'll get you some hot water." Larry said nothing, took the stomach medicine, and went to the restroom. When he came out, Victoria, who said she'd wait, was nowhere to be found. He was about to leave when he heard faint sounds from the next restroom. He walked over to take a look. Victoria was against the sink, being deeply kissed by Henry. Victoria half-heartedly resisted. "Stop. My Larry is waiting for me." "But it's been so long since I've seen you, Victoria." Henry's voice was low and hoarse. "It's okay. I know in your heart, I'm still nothing. Even if I braved the rain to bring medicine for Larry. I know you only have eyes for him." Hearing this, Henry's voice carried a hint of sobbing. "Victoria, I just want to see you happy." Victoria seemed moved, holding his neck tighter, kissing him deeper. Henry let out a soft groan. She chuckled softly, her voice tender. "You got excited so easily?" Henry's face turned red. "Go back to Larry. I'll handle it myself." "And how will you do that?" Victoria teased affectionately. "Some things need a woman's help to feel right." Her hand moved downward. What followed were the sounds of cloth rustling, Henry's repressed breathing, and Victoria's low coaxing voice. "Be good. I know you want me very much." Larry stood outside, feeling a searing pain. He remembered their first kiss. When she was 18, under the sky full of fireworks, she looked into his eyes and carefully asked, "Larry, can I kiss you?" He nodded, face flushed. She stood on her toes and kissed his lips, tenderly as if she was holding a fragile treasure. He remembered their first night together. He was restrained and cautious, worried he might hurt her. But Victoria shook her head, sat on his lap, pressed against him, and helped release his desires. She said only he could completely relax her. But now she was in the bathroom, pleasuring another man with her fingers. "Victoria, oh Victoria, you've hurt me so deeply." His heart felt like it was being torn apart, painful enough to almost knock him off his feet. He staggered back and accidentally bumped into a decorative vase by the wall. "Who's out there?" Victoria's sharp voice called out. When Victoria headed out, the hallway was empty. Only an orange cat was crouching in the corner, watching her warily. "Looks like it's just the cat." Henry followed her out, speaking softly. "You should get back to Larry. I'll just grab a cab home later." Victoria frowned. "It's pouring outside. How are you going to get a cab?" "Just stay with me." Henry bit his lip, speaking in a low voice. "But Larry, who's your wife?" Victoria stood on her toes and wrapped her arms around his neck. Henry lowered his head, a somber look in his eyes. "You are." "Then listen to me." She took his hand and led him back to the music hall. When they pushed the door open, Larry was still sitting in his spot, quietly listening to the performance. Victoria sighed in relief, pulling Henry down beside him, casually explaining, "Honey, it's raining heavily outside. He likes the music too, so I thought I'd have him stay." Larry simply nodded, not exposing her lie. Throughout the concert, Victoria continued to dote on Larry, asking if he was cold, turning off the air conditioner, even whispering to see if he wanted to leave early to rest. But Larry knew her left hand was always entwined with Henry's. He suddenly thought about the first time they held hands. He was 16. It was a snowy winter night. She had climbed over the wall to his house, presenting her icy red hands to him, smiling. "Larry, my hands are freezing. Can you warm them?" He laughingly scolded her for having no shame, but held her hands tightly. She instantly tightened her grip too, never letting go. Back then, he was all she saw, and now, she held him with one hand, another person with the other. A tear fell uncontrollably down his cheek. Victoria noticed immediately, brushing her thumb gently against his face. "What's wrong?" Larry gave a silent smile, softly saying, "The music is moving." Victoria chuckled softly, her voice gentle. "Why are you always so sensitive, He didn't reply, letting her wipe away his tears. After the concert ended and the crowd thinned out, Victoria didn't take Larry home. She had instruments brought up, including a piano, cello, and violin, each incredibly valuable. "You said you liked these instruments before, so I bought them all. Do you like them?" She smiled and asked him. One of the staff quickly added, "Larry, Victoria went through a lot to get these. She bid at high prices from private collectors and borrowed some from museums." Henry stood nearby, a shadow crossing his eyes. Larry curled his lips, just about to speak. But suddenly, Henry reached out curiously, tugging at a decorative cord. "What's this?" "Don't pull that." A staff member's face went pale, but it was too late. There was a loud mechanical noise from above, and the next second, heavy lighting rigs and audio equipment came crashing down. In a flash, Victoria pulled Henry aside, shielding him as they rolled away. Larry stood rooted to the spot, watching helplessly as the shadow descended upon him. Pain engulfed him, and he fell into a pool of blood. His final conscious thought was Victoria's frantic shouting, "Larry," but he knew she was holding someone else. Larry had a long dream. In it, 14-year-old Victoria was still in her school uniform, her mouth bruised but her smile bold and carefree. As he applied ointment with red eyes, he scolded her. "Are you crazy? How could you go looking for those boys? I know you're a black belt in Taekwondo, but you shouldn't be fighting like that, not even if you were Ultraman." She raised an eyebrow, unconcerned. "Why shouldn't I? They bullied you. That's not okay." The young girl's eyes blazed with heat and determination. "Even though I'm a girl, you're my future husband. As long as I'm here, you won't be harmed." In the dream, Larry's face was wet with tears, unable to help calling her name Victoria. "Why are you always so good to me?" But she seemed unable to hear him, taking the hand of 14-year-old him and walking away. Abruptly, the scene flipped. In reality, Victoria was shielding Henry, leaving him injured, with blood tainting his vision. He jolted awake, tears soaking his pillowcase. Before he fully gathered his wits, he saw Henry in the hospital room, covering his face in guilt. "What do I do? It's all my fault. I shouldn't have pulled that cord. If I hadn't, Larry wouldn't be hurt. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it." Victoria wiped his tears helplessly. Really? Henry nodded. Yeah, I made a mistake and I have to own up to it or I just can't sleep at night. Victoria chuckled softly and hugged him. Then, call me honey. Henry froze. What? Say it. He turned his eyes away and mumbled, honey. Victoria ruffled his hair, her voice gentle. Since you called me honey, you gotta listen to me. I've got my own way of handling this. You don't need to worry about it. Henry could only leave. Larry watched the whole thing quietly, accidentally knocking over the water cup on the bedside table with his fingers. Victoria turned around quickly, realizing he was awake. She hurried over, concern filling her eyes. Larry, how are you feeling? Is anything hurting? She held his hand, sounding regretful. I'm sorry. Things were chaotic. I mistook someone else for you. Larry closed his eyes, not calling out her lie. He just asked softly, where's Henry? Victoria's face changed slightly, thinking he wanted to cause trouble for Henry. She explained instantly it wasn't intentional on his part, but it was wrong. I've punished him sternly. Larry recalled her making Henry call her honey earlier, thinking, was that the punishment? Pretty harsh, I guess. He didn't say a word. He didn't furiously question why she mistook someone else or accuse her of favoritism. He just calmly said, I'm hungry. Victoria was stunned. She stared into his eyes and finally sensed something off. He was too calm like a still pond. She opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but Larry repeated, I'm hungry, completely messing up her thoughts. She suppressed her unease and nodded gently. All right, hubby, I'll grab you something to eat. Hold on. She grabbed her keys and rushed out. As the door closed, Larry's tears fell uncontrollably, but he quickly wiped them away. He looked out the window. The sunlight was blinding but couldn't reach his heart. Love causes hysteria. Resentment triggers outbursts. But now, for Victoria, he had neither love nor hate. Victoria canceled all her work commitments and stayed by Larry's side at the hospital. She personally fed him, cleaned his wounds, and even checked at night to make sure he didn't kick off his covers. But Larry remained calm throughout. Come discharge day, Victoria felt he must be suffocating. She threw a grand party to celebrate his recovery. The ballroom was lavish and opulent. Towers of champagne were stacked high. Guests mingled in their finest attire, all envy and admiration. Victoria was spoiling Larry to the core, they said. Rumor had it all the gifts were limited editions, with some being auction highlights. Larry was one lucky man. Standing in the crowd, Larry didn't crack a smile. Victoria couldn't hold back any longer. She pulled him aside and asked quietly, Are you still mad? She softly rubbed his wrist, her tone placating. I swear, I really mistook someone else at that moment. What can I do to get you to forgive me? Just say it and I'll do it, all right? Larry looked at her and suddenly smiled. Okay then, fire Henry. Victoria's expression shifted, her voice softening. His family is struggling. His parents are sick. Why make it so extreme? Larry quietly watched her. Earlier, she said she'd do anything, but when it came to Henry, she quickly backtracked. As he was about to speak, Victoria's phone rang. It was Henry. On the phone, he shouted loudly, Victoria, help me. Someone hired a group of thugs, and they said they're going to kill me. Victoria's face instantly changed. What are you saying? Where are you now? But the call was already disconnected. Victoria tried to call back immediately but couldn't get through. She turned to Larry with a gaze that shifted from urgency to suspicion to suppressed anger. Larry, where is Henry? Her voice was tight, but she remained somewhat composed. Larry's heart sank. She didn't trust him. She didn't even need proof to believe it was him. Larry's voice trembled. You suspect me? It's not suspicion. She rubbed her forehead. It's just that he mentioned people were going to hurt him. So? Larry's voice shook. You think it was me? Victoria was silent for a moment and then spoke softly. I didn't say that. It's just urgent right now. You panic just like that from a single call? Larry suddenly laughed, though his eyes were cold. Victoria, what exactly is your relationship with him? She frowned even more. This is a life and death situation, and you're getting jealous now? Jealous? Larry's voice was as light as a feather dropping. You think this is jealousy? Victoria took a deep breath, trying to soften her tone. Larry, there's really nothing between him and me. But he might be in trouble now. Just tell me, was it you? It wasn't me. Larry interrupted her, each word sharp as a knife. I'll say it one last time. I don't know where he is, and I didn't have people mess with him. Victoria stared at him, the agitation in her eyes growing more apparent. Time ticked by and she still couldn't reach Henry. Finally, she completely lost patience. She grabbed Larry's wrist, her grip so tight it was like she could crush his bones. Larry, I said I've already punished him. Why are you doing this? Killing someone makes you legally responsible, too. I don't have time for this nonsense. Tell me, where's Henry? Larry turned pale from the pain but stubbornly repeated, I don't know. No matter how many times you ask, I don't know. Victoria was furious. Larry, it's like I never knew you. She let go of him fiercely. Larry staggered a few steps. His lower back slammed into the sharp edge of a table, and his forehead hit the sharp edge of a decoration. Blood gushed out instantly. There were screams around them. Victoria. Larry is hurt, but Victoria ignored them. She walked out without looking back, making calls and barking orders. Pull up the security footage now. Find out where Henry was last seen. Larry steadied himself with the table's edge, slowly standing up. Blood ran down his temple, warm and sticky, but he didn't feel the pain. Compared to the pain in his broken heart, this injury was nothing. He stared blankly in the direction Victoria left, suddenly laughing. Why would she care about him? Right now, her entire focus was on Henry. Just like before, it was all on him. People rushed forward, wanting to take him to a hospital, but he gently shook his head, pushing away every helping hand, and walked out of the hall alone. Just as he stepped out, there was a loud crash from behind. Larry turned back and saw a plaque that read Victoria loves Larry forever fall heavily to the ground and shatter in two. Looking at the plaque, he suddenly started laughing. As the laughter continued, tears began to fall. Victoria, you're forever. Turns out it's so short. Larry went home alone. He silently treated the cut on his forehead, then began packing. The collectibles, rings, watches that Victoria gave him, the cards she handwrote, the albums they took together, everything related to her was packed into boxes, taken down, and thrown into the dumpster below trip by trip. After dumping the last box, the night wind, carrying tiny snowflakes, bit into his cheeks. Standing under the streetlight, he thought it was all a joke. What used to be treasured memories were now just junk in a garbage heap. As he turned, a sack was suddenly pulled over his head. Before he could struggle, pain shot through the back of his neck, and he blacked out. When Larry came to, he was still in the sack, his hands tied behind him, his mouth gagged. Through the gap in the sack, he saw Victoria and Henry sitting high on a couch, surrounded by bodyguards. Victoria, we caught him. This is the thug leader Larry sent to mess with Henry, a bodyguard reported respectfully. Henry clung to Victoria's hand, his voice timid. Victoria, maybe we should just let it go. You came in time and nothing really happened to me. Victoria sneered, no way. Her slender fingers stroked Henry's cheek lovingly, in a tone overly gentle. I can't bear to hurt Larry, but since he dared to mess with you, I need to settle the score. If these are the people he hired, I'll make an example out of them so he won't dare do it again. Larry felt an icy chill run through his body. He finally understood. This was all Henry's setup. Henry pretended to be attacked by thugs, then bribed someone to kidnap him, telling Victoria he was the thug leader to get her to unknowingly torment Larry. He struggled desperately, trying to call out Victoria's name, but his mouth, stuffed, could only make weak whimpering sounds. Henry sighed empathetically, then, take it easy on him. He's still Larry's man after all. Victoria's eyes turned cold. Easy? No way. He dared to hurt you. I'll show him a fate worse than death. In the next moment, Larry was dragged to a high platform. Below was a swimming pool several feet deep, its icy water reflecting the harsh, white lights. Still in the sack, bound with ropes, he was shoved off the edge of the platform. The cold water rushed into the sack, and the impact felt like a heavy blow to his insides. Water flooded in through his nose and mouth, making his vision go dark and his lungs feel like they were being pierced by needles. It hurt so bad he curled up instinctively. Help! Help! His weak cries were drowned out by the water. The sack got heavier as it soaked up the water, weighing him down like a lead block. He struggled desperately, but the ropes just got tighter, choking him, cutting off his air. Just when he was about to pass out, the rope suddenly tightened, pulling him hard out of the water. He coughed violently, water mixed with blood spraying from his lungs. Before he could catch his breath, he was pushed down again. Once, twice, 3 times. Each time going under felt like being thrown into an ice pit, and each time being pulled up felt like being skinned alive. Over and over, it was torture. Larry was losing consciousness, his ears buzzing, and his lungs burning like they were going to explode. When he got pulled up one more time, Henry finally couldn't stand it and called out to stop. Enough, Victoria. Stop torturing him. Victoria just sneered. Not done yet. She grabbed the iron rod handed to her by the bodyguard and walked over to Larry. You mess with me, you pay the price. The first blow landed hard on his back, making Larry arch like an electric shock hit him. The pain exploded from his spine and spread to every inch of him. He bit down on the cloth in his mouth but still let out a muffled groan. Each hit was relentless, aiming to break his bones and shatter his organs. He could feel the warm liquid trickling from his lips, dripping down his chin onto the floor. 99 blows in total, delivered by her own hand. By the end, Larry didn't even feel pain anymore. His mind was a fog, and he could barely see. His body felt shredded, like it had been through a meat grinder. When the last blow landed, he collapsed like a rag doll, the pool of blood beneath him spreading, soaking his clothes and staining the ground. She lifted her shiny leather shoe and crushed the exposed fingers beneath it. The crack of bones was clear as day. Larry convulsed in agony, unable to even scream. Finally satisfied, Victoria withdrew her foot and turned to fall into Henry's arms. She lightly ran her fingers through his hair and asked, "Did I scare you just now?" She said soothingly, "It's over now, no one will bother you anymore." She waved to the bodyguard, dismissing Larry as if dealing with trash. Dump him back. With that, she and Henry left without looking back, her high heels making sticky sounds in the pool of blood. The cloth in Larry's mouth finally came loose. With every ounce of strength left, he rasped her name, Victoria. His voice barely more than a flicker in the wind. She paused for a second, but Henry seized the moment to faint, leaning against her. "Victoria, my head hurts suddenly." Victoria immediately refocused, ignoring her earlier hesitation. "I'll get you to a hospital right away." She hurried off, never looking back. Watching her walk away, Larry began to laugh. Tears mixed with blood rolled down his face. If only she had turned around to look, she would see the person she once cherished was the one she had nearly beaten to death. But she didn't. Her eyes were full of only Henry. When Larry came to again, he was dumped on the floor of a villa. Wet and bruised, the pain was unbearable, like his bones had been crushed. He struggled to get up, every movement tearing at the wounds on his back. His fingers were swollen beyond recognition. Where they broke, the skin was a sickly, bruised color. His phone vibrated in his pocket. With shaking hands, he pulled it out and saw 2 messages. The first was from Victoria. "Honey, I was wrong before. I shouldn't have snapped at you. I just don't want you to make mistakes. I'm at the hospital with Henry for a few days. Won't be back until he's better." Larry stared at the screen, a bittersweet grin spreading on his face. How laughable it all was. She tortured him half to death, yet she could still call him hubby like nothing happened. She didn't even notice he was missing. The second message was a notification. "Larry, your request for identity cancellation and name change has been approved. Effective immediately." Larry clutched his phone tightly, his knuckles white. Finally, he could leave. He forced himself to stand, changed into clean clothes, and grabbed the suitcase he'd packed long ago. Everything that belonged to him was gone except 2 things. First, the couple's necklace Victoria gave him when she turned 18. The pendant hid a mini camera. When she gave it to him, she said, "Larry, I want to know what you're doing at all times." Sweet back then, now just ironic. She probably hadn't checked it in ages. But if she did, she'd see it was her who pushed him into that high-diving pool every time. She was the one who hit him 99 times. She was the one who crushed his finger bones. Second thing, the love letters she wrote while pursuing him. A thick stack, the yellowing paper still bearing the sign of a young girl's handwriting. "Larry, I saw you in a white shirt today, and my heart was beating so fast, I thought I might die. Larry, let's get married when I graduate, okay? I can't wait another day. Larry, I will love you forever. Only you." Larry gently touched those words, suddenly remembering when she hugged him with teary eyes at 18, saying, "Larry, I can't live without you." Promises that used to keep him awake now seemed ridiculous. Larry put the necklace and letters on the coffee table, then turned away without hesitation. He tossed his phone in the trash, burying the past with it. From now on, the world would no longer see the Larry who shed tears for Victoria. When the plane took off, Larry watched the city's lights fade, momentarily seeing 18-year-old Victoria smiling at him from the clouds. Then, a sharp pain exploded in his ribs, the vision vanished, and he bit his lip hard, blood filling his mouth. "Sir, do you need help?" asked the woman next to him, lowering her magazine. She noticed Larry's cold sweat. Larry shook his head and buried his face deeper into the scarf, still smelling of dank basement. A cheap buy from the airport restroom. "I'm fine," his voice light, just a bit airsick. Stella eyed this young man who felt out of place. His camel coat was a size too large, and there was a ring mark on his left ring finger, while the right hand was twisted in an unsettling way. Even in a 78-degree cabin, he couldn't stop trembling. "I'm a doctor." Stella handed him a tissue. "You don't look well." Larry accepted it, and Stella noticed the bruises on his wrist, marks of a professional binding. She realized this wasn't a typical domestic abuse case. "Thanks." Larry clenched the tissue in his palm but didn't use it. No traces. Not now. But as soon as they landed, Victoria couldn't find him even if she turned the earth upside down. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot up from his abdomen, and his vision darkened, warm liquid dripping from his nose. His fingers touched something sticky and red. Stella quickly unbuckled her seatbelt. "Flight attendant, we need medical help here." Through his blurry view, Larry saw her deft fingers undo his collar. Oddly, he thought of Victoria's hands. Last night, they were unbuttoning Henry's shirt the same way. He felt hands lifting him, like a leaf on a stormy sea. Remembered being pushed into the pool, icy water stabbing his lungs, and the rough sackcloth burning his cheek. The worst was Victoria's words. "Anyone who touches me pays the price." Each word a dull knife to his heart. Before losing consciousness, he heard his own hoarse laughter. Ironic, the rib Victoria broke was now stabbing his lung. She always said she'd protect him, yet ended up being the one who hurt him the most. The cabin lights shook above. Stella, sweaty, was watching the stranger slipping away and couldn't do nothing. "Do we need an emergency landing?" whispered the attendant. Larry convulsed violently. Stella held him down and told the attendant, "Contact the airport for an ambulance. He has multiple fractures and internal bleeding." She was cut off by a grip on her wrist. Those unfocused eyes locked for a moment, filled with a shocking resolve. "No, hospital," Larry wheezed, blood frothing from his mouth. "Please." Stella froze, nodding as if under a spell. "I have a retreat in the outskirts." He awoke to the smell of disinfectant. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, and Larry stared at the ceiling, unsure if this was real or a dream. A gentle voice came from beside him. "Awake?" Startled, he turned to a pair of calm eyes. The woman held a medical chart, casually closed it seeing him awake. "You suffered internal bleeding on the plane. I administered emergency care. How do you feel?" Larry's hand went to his abdomen. The pain was lesser, yet a dull ache lingered under the skin. His voice came out raspy, "Thank you." The woman nodded and handed him a cup of warm water. "I'm Stella. This is my private retreat, very safe." The cup was warm in his hand, and Larry's fingers traced its edge unconsciously. He fell silent, then softly said, "L. My name is L." Larry stayed at the retreat healing. Stella checked on him daily, but never pried into his past. Once, during a dressing change, a nurse accidentally knocked a tray over. The clatter of metal on the floor made Larry flinch and curl up instinctively. Stella paused mid-motion. She noted his reflexive guard over his ribs and the lingering wrist bruises. These injuries aren't accidental. Larry's breath hitched. Stella didn't push, just calmly fixed his collar. "You don't have to answer. If you need anything though, the lawyers and police here can assist." Larry gripped the sheet, shaking his head. Stella left without another word, and just at the door, Larry called softly, "Thank you." She turned, saw a faint smile on his pale face, but he added, "No need, really." Days at the retreat passed almost dreamlike. Larry recovered gradually, sometimes sunbathing in the garden. One afternoon, as he walked by the conference room, he overheard Stella arguing with someone. "They're sticking to the price. We can't bend. But market data clearly shows they're overvalued by at least 30%. Larry halted. On impulse, he pushed open the door, and everyone's eyes turned to him. Stella frowned. "L?" Larry pursed his lips, pointing at the financial reports on the screen. After a moment, he spoke. "The cash flow forecast on page 3 has issues. They're hiding some debt. If you calculate this way, the actual premium should adjust up by 15%. Silence fell over the room. Stella stared at him for a few seconds and then suddenly pushed the files over. "Go on." The next day, Stella slid a contract in front of him. "The merger deal's sorted. If you're interested, you could come on as a strategic advisor at my company." Larry paused, then suddenly smiled. "Aren't you afraid I'm a corporate spy?" Stella leaned against the table, looked at him, and calmly said, "I looked into your background. Didn't really find anything. But my gut says you're trustworthy." In the VIP hospital room, the scent of disinfectant was masked by the lilies nearby. Victoria sat bedside, holding a bowl of steaming chicken soup. The spoon clinked softly against the bowl's edge. "Henry, just one more sip." She brought the spoon to Henry's lips, her voice so warm it almost melted. "I simmered it for 4 hours, got all the fat out." Henry, pale-faced, stifled a smile, sipping gently as she held it. His lashes cast shadows in the light. "Victoria, with you here, won't Larry—" "He won't mind," Victoria interrupted, sounding as if convincing herself. "Larry's the most understanding." But when she set the bowl down, the sudden ding of the ceramic spoon hitting the glass table stung like a sharp pain in her temple. It had been 3 days. 3 days without word from Larry. She took out her phone. The lock screen lit up, showing Larry's peaceful sleeping face. 5:03 p.m. "Babe, I'll be home late." 10:47 p.m. "Still mad?" Next day, 9:15 a.m. "Larry, pick up, please." The last message from this morning. A lonely green bubble at the top of the chat. "I need to make a call." She suddenly stood, her skirt tipping over a stool. At the end of the hallway in the fire escape, Victoria pressed dial for the 3rd time. A robotic voice echoed in both English and Chinese, saying nobody was available to answer. Then she called her assistant. "Xiao Chun, head to the villa." She paused, not asking if he saw Larry, just told him to check the security system. About half an hour later, the assistant messaged back. "Victoria, everything's fine with the villa security system, but what? The kitchen garbage disposal hasn't been used in 3 days. The smart system logs the last use the day you left." Victoria's breath caught for a moment. Larry had OCD. He'd never let trash sit overnight. The fingerprint lock beeped familiarly, and the entry lights flickered on. But everything was pitch black inside. No lights on, and it stayed silent as the grave since she opened the door. "Larry?" Her voice echoed in the high-ceilinged living room. No response. The faint rose scent had vanished, replaced by a chilling emptiness. Victoria stood at the master bedroom door, her heart racing with unexplainable panic. When she opened it, she couldn't help but widen her eyes at the sight. The closet stood open, his clothes gone without a trace. His usual cologne, sunglasses, all missing from the dresser. The photo that was usually by the bed, to now lay alone frame. Her heart sank. She rushed to the study, yanked open drawers, passport, ID, bank cards, everything proving he existed, gone. On the coffee table lay just two things quietly, a necklace and a bunch of yellowed love letters. Victoria's hand shook as she picked up the necklace. She'd given it to him on his 18th birthday. He never took it off. Now Larry was nowhere, hanging only there like a ghost. Victoria refused to believe the worst possibility. She pulled out her phone, dialing the assistant again. Find Larry's whereabouts now. Use every connection. Turn the earth upside down if you have to. On the phone, there was a quick acknowledgement, the sound of typing only in her ear. No time felt as long to Victoria as it did then. After a moment, her assistant's hesitant voice came through. Victoria, Larry's identity info has been deactivated. Deactivated? Why would Larry suddenly deactivate his identity? What happened while she was away? Victoria's lashes trembled. Her hand unknowingly clenched, turning pale. The sting in her palm reminded her of something. The necklace, it could have a clue about Larry's whereabouts. She turned abruptly, racing to the study, pulling up the footage. But what she saw in the footage made her mind go blank. In the video, Henry stood at the brink of a platform, a cold smile on his face, and a struggling person in a sack. As the fabric slipped off, she recognized that face. Victoria's breath hitched. The pale face, the messy hair, the blood on the corner of his mouth. It was Larry. He looked her way, lips trembling as if to say something before she pushed him herself. The sound of splashing echoed in the monitoring room, leaving only a sharp ringing in Victoria's ears. She clenched onto the necklace, her knuckles white, a metallic taste rising in her throat. Suddenly, as if realizing something, she dragged the progress bar and stopped suddenly. Henry's smile was so explicit, almost mocking the Victoria before the screen. Her breath grew rapid as she stared at this once unfamiliar face. Then the phone rang again. Victoria heard her assistant's voice coming through the phone from the hospital, but she cut it off sharply. Get the car ready. Her voice was so hoarse it was almost unrecognizable. I'm heading over now. The tires screeched harshly against the road. Don't worry. She can't find anything. I destroyed that bitch's medical records ages ago. Yeah, and the security footage at the villa is wiped clean. Serves him right for being so oblivious. It's like every word was a poisoned needle, bursting her delusion to pieces. The door to the room was suddenly slammed open. Victoria stood at the entrance, her face dark and ominous. Henry's phone clattered to the floor. Victoria? How did you? You know that was Larry. Victoria's voice was raspily terrifying, like a demon risen from hell. Henry's face went pale, his fingers clutching the bedsheet in unconscious terror. I don't know what you're talking about. The person in the bag. She grabbed his wrist harshly, almost crushing the bone. You knew it was him all along, didn't you? Tears sprung to Henry's eyes. Victoria, you're hurting me. But Victoria wasn't listening. With bloodshot eyes, she bore into him. Answer me. I just loved you too much. His voice was broken with fear. I was afraid he'd take you away. I couldn't let that happen. Victoria's look of disgust fell on Henry before she let go of him like he was something filthy. Her eyes scanned the room before settling on the fruit knife on the nightstand. The knife's cold reflection captured her twisted expression and Henry's sudden terrified eyes. You can't, he stammered, scrambling backward as the four-stand crashed to the floor. In Victoria's office, the light was cold white. Her desk was covered with documents detailing how Henry had subtly sowed discord between her and Larry. Among them was a stack from a private detective. Photos, recordings, bank transfers, and even testimony from those thugs. Henry hired us, one had said, to put on a show. The money was good. He wanted us to act like we'd beat him down. But it was just an act. He promised extra if Victoria bought it afterward. Victoria's fingers whitened as complex emotions swirled in her eyes. All along, this was Henry's production, and she had pushed the person she loved into the abyss. Henry was escorted into the office by bodyguards, still trying to please her with a smile. "Victoria, what's so urgent?" Before he could finish, a stack of papers hit him squarely in the face. "Explain." Victoria's voice was chillingly cold. Papers scattered on the floor. Henry glimpsed a photo and a bank transaction that froze his smile. "I can explain." He frantically crouched to gather them, his fingers trembling. "Someone framed me. It must be Larry. He hates me, so he—" "Larry?" Victoria's gaze remained fixed on him, unexpectedly calm. She pulled a recorder from her drawer and pressed play. "That bastard deserved it." Henry's sharp, venomous voice filled the office. Henry's face went ghostly white. Summoning a feeble smile, Henry tossed the evidence aside and approached Victoria slowly. "Victoria, you have to believe me. I didn't do those things." Meeting Victoria's icy stare, his voice came faster. "You have to believe me. I love you so much." "Love?" Victoria seemed puzzled. She grasped his chin. "You do something like this and dare talk about love? Isn't that just sick? And what about you? Thinking you're someone special?" Henry suddenly lifted his head, his innocence replaced by fierce hate. "Victoria, you came to me. You used me as a stand-in, made me think you loved me." He shook free from her hold, mocking her. "You're blind, unable to tell real love from fake, putting on all these tragic airs. For what? Larry's long gone. He'd rather leave everything behind than look at you again." Victoria's eyes contracted severely, her chest like it took a massive blow. Henry laughed even more caustically. "You know what he left behind before he went? That necklace, right? The one with the camera inside? You saw the footage. Every single hit, wasn't it you who did them?" Silence suffocated the room for a few seconds. Victoria started laughing suddenly. She stood deliberately, approaching Henry and reaching up to gently caress his face. A lover's tender touch, accompanied by an ice-cold gaze. "You're right. I was blind." Her voice was soft, almost lovingly. "It's time to correct my errors." Before Henry could understand, the door opened again, and two bodyguards moved forward, tying him tightly with rough rope. Henry's eyes widened as he nearly collapsed under the pressure. "Victoria, you can't do this to me. I'll give back the money." Victoria took a step back, her face expressionless as she watched his hands being cuffed. "Give it back? You think it's about the money?" She leaned close to his ear, her whisper dripping like venom off her tongue. "I'll show you what it means to wish you were dead." Victoria stood in the hallway of the mental hospital, the fluorescent light casting long shadows. She held a file detailing every crime Henry had committed over the years. Embezzlement, fraud, assault, even how he meticulously framed Larry. The door to the ward opened, and Henry was huddled in the corner, his face wrapped in bandages from self-inflicted wounds. Seeing Victoria, a glimmer of hope passed through his eyes. "Victoria, are you here to rescue me?" He crawled a few steps but only collapsed from weakness. Henry lay on the floor, filthy, fingers clutching the hem of Victoria's dress. Victoria didn't respond. She slowly crouched, looking down at him with an icy gaze. Her voice was steady, calm. "Henry, do you know why I'm here?" Henry shook his head, trembling, tears dripping down. I know I was wrong. I really know." "Wrong?" Victoria laughed coldly, tossing the file in front of him. "This is what you call knowing you were wrong?" Henry glanced at the file's content, and his face turned ghostly white. "No, this wasn't me. Someone set me up. Victoria, you have to believe me." "Believe me? Set you up?" Victoria leaned down, gripping his chin hard enough to break bone. "Do you think I'd fall for your lies again?" She released him, wiping her hands with a handkerchief, disgust etched on her face. The gesture cut into Henry, his eyes narrowing as he lunged at her, only to be kicked away violently. He fell to the ground, screaming hysterically, "Victoria, you can't do this to me. I love you so much. I did everything for you." "For me?" Victoria's eyes went cold. You destroyed everything between Larry and me for your selfish desires. That's for me? In that case, it's my turn to do something for you. She turned to the doctor at the door, nodding. From today, I'll personally oversee his treatment. With deference, the doctor handed over a new medical file. Victoria opened it to the first page. It read, Patient 0487, Treatment Plan, Electroconvulsive Therapy, Medication Control, Lifetime Confinement. Henry started to struggle frantically. No, you can't do this to me. Victoria, I curse you. Curse you to never get Larry's forgiveness. Victoria left the hospital room without looking back, while Henry's heart-wrenching cries echoed behind her. She stood in the hallway and lit a cigarette, the smoke swirling around her unclear gaze. Her assistant approached cautiously. Victoria, as per your instructions, Henry's family assets have been completely frozen, and Henry's parents have been restricted from taking any actions to ensure they can't find Henry, the patient. Victoria nodded slightly. Leak his embezzlement to the media. I want him utterly disgraced. The assistant nodded and left, as Victoria stubbed out her cigarette and looked out at the night sky. She knew that this revenge wouldn't make up for the harm Larry suffered, but at least she wouldn't allow Henry to hurt anyone else. Victoria stood in front of the villa where she and Larry used to live, replaying the security footage she'd watched countless times. But all the surveillance records were wiped clean by Henry, leaving no useful clues. Keep looking. Her voice was hoarse, eyes bloodshot. Even if we have to turn the whole city upside down. Find him. Her assistant nervously handed over a document. Victoria, Larry's identity information has been deleted, and his entry and exit records erased. Victoria clenched her fist so tightly her knuckles turned white. She went frantically through all her connections, sparing no expense on a bounty, but it was as if Larry vanished into thin air. She visited every place they'd been together, from their high school campus, amusement parks, mountaintop temples, and even the city abroad where he used to study. But each time she came up empty-handed. She began having frequent dreams, where Larry stood in a pool of blood, looking at her coldly. Victoria, you pushed me into the hell yourself. Awaking drenched in sweat, her heart ached like a piece had been torn from it. Victoria expanded her search area, neglecting company matters. She flew between countries, hoping to find that familiar figure. 3 months later, Victoria stood outside a luxury store on Montaigne Avenue, staring vacantly at the wedding dresses in the window. Larry once said his favorite wedding was simple, no lace, no diamonds, just pure white. She smirked at the memory. Those days were like bubbles vanished. She didn't even know where Larry was. Suddenly, out of the corner of her eye, she spotted a familiar figure. Blonde hair, tall frame, walking with the same gait as the person from her dreams. Her heart skipped a beat, and she instinctively followed. Larry. The man didn't turn, continued on. She quickened her pace, reaching out to grab his wrist. But the next second, a black car stopped in front of him. A woman in a purple gown embraced him, whispered in his ear, making him smile faintly. His profile revealed a completely unfamiliar face. Victoria stood frozen. It wasn't him, just a similar silhouette. She dropped her hand, throat tight. Her phone rang, her assistant's timid voice on the other end. Victoria, the evening event is about to start. Victoria closed her eyes, hung up, and walked away. Just as she turned, Larry put down his cup, gazing at her fading figure from a cafe on the street corner. Was it her? Stella asked, following his gaze. Larry nodded slightly. He stood up, taking Stella's hand. Let's go. The gala awaits. Larry adjusted the diamond earring in front of the full-length mirror, a faint smile playing on his lips. Victoria's attending the private event tonight too, Stella mentioned, handing him a glass of champagne. Is your focus on her? Or is this event about her? Larry took the glass, tapping the rim lightly with his finger, making a crisp sound. You're overthinking it. At the gala, crystal lights cast a dazzling glow. Holding champagne, Larry casually conversed with European business representatives, his fluent French and sharp business insights drawing attention. As Victoria entered the venue, Her eyes were subconsciously drawn to his figure exhibiting familiar, sharp poise. She frowned slightly, intending to approach, but he turned, brushing past her. In that moment, she caught a faint scent of roses. Victoria spun around, but the figure vanished into the crowd. Who was that gentleman? She stopped a server, her voice tight. That's Mr. L, the founder of the rising investment company LY, the server replied with a smile. Victoria's pupils contracted sharply. LY, she murmured. That was unmistakably an acronym for Larry's initials. She dared not believe, yet couldn't help but hope. Larry was back. It was Stella's third time noticing Larry's unusual attention toward the V group. She stood by the study door, watching his tall figure tense under the lamp, the pen skidding fiercely across the paper. It didn't seem like data analysis, more like dissecting a foe. Reviewing V group's reports again? Stella brought hot milk, making her steps more pronounced on purpose. Larry's fingers twitched almost imperceptibly, quickly closing the folder. Just routine analysis, he said, taking the milk, smiling perfectly, learning about future competitors. Stella didn't call out his lie. For 3 months, he'd studied V Group more than any other, sometimes working late into the night. Yet whenever she tried to query, he'd divert the subject, especially since that unilateral encounter in Paris. Don't stay up too late, she finally said, placing the cup down. There's an early meeting tomorrow. Larry nodded, but his gaze had already drifted back to the pile of documents. As Stella shut the study door, she heard the pen scratch paper once more, a manifestation of some deep-seated fixation. At 3:17 a.m., a sharp scream pierced the villa's silence. Stella sprang from bed, instantly alert with a doctor's instincts. The sound came from Larry's room. She rushed without bothering with shoes, opening the door to a sight that made her heart clench. Larry was huddled in the corner, hands clamping his own throat, his face as pale as a sheet. His pajamas clung to his sweat-soaked, slender back, his body shaking like a leaf. Most haunting were his eyes, pupils dilated, gaze unfocused, as if witnessing a horrific scene elsewhere. L. Stella knelt in front of him, hesitant to touch him. Look at me. Can you hear me? No response. Larry was breathing more and more heavily, and his lips were starting to turn blue. It was an acute PTSD episode. Stella quickly assessed the situation. She gently held Larry's wrist and felt the cold, clammy sweat. Breathe with me, she said, placing his hand on her chest. Feel my breathing pattern. Take it slow. Stella purposely slowed her breathing, her chest rising and falling steadily. She could feel the uneven scars on his wrist. After a minute or two, Larry's breathing finally began to match hers. His pupils refocused, and realizing who was in front of him, he jerked his hand away. I'm okay, he rasped, instinctively pulling down his pajama sleeve to cover his wrist. Sorry, it was just a nightmare. Stella didn't call out this flimsy lie. She got up to pour a glass of water and added a few drops of calming essential oil to the nearby diffuser. Have some water. She handed it to him, deliberately keeping a safe distance. I'll get you a towel. When she returned from the bathroom, Larry had moved to the window's single chair, holding the glass and staring out at the night. Moonlight outlined his profile, casting a small shadow under his eyelashes. Stella draped the towel over his shoulder and sat in an armchair opposite him. Do you want to talk about the nightmare? She asked casually, like discussing the next day's weather. Larry's fingers absent-mindedly rubbed the rim of the glass. After a long silence, he suddenly spoke. Do you know what it feels like to drown? Stella was slightly startled. At first, water floods your nose, burning like fire. Larry spoke softly, as if telling someone else's story. Then your lungs start to spasm, trying to breathe but only taking in more water. The worst part is, he looked up, feeling your life slip away, powerless. Stella noticed his left ring finger was unnaturally twisted, a deformity from a fracture that had healed poorly. I dreamt. Larry suddenly stood up, walking to the desk, pulling a manila envelope from the bottom drawer. You should see this. Stella took the heavy envelope, emptying it to find a stack of photos, medical records, and a coffee-stained marriage certificate copy. So this was your original name. The words disappeared from Stella's lips as the shock overcame her. Larry lay in a pool of blood, with a gruesome wound on his forehead and a carpet-stained dark red beneath him. The medical report stated 3 rib fractures, a shattered right index finger, and water in his lungs. This is Victoria's handiwork. Larry's voice was unusually calm. She's my ex-wife. Larry paused, then looked at the marriage certificate. No, we weren't really anything, he said with a self-deprecating chuckle. She thought the person in the sack was a thug who'd wronged her husband, but it was actually me. Stella flipped to the next page, seeing a surveillance snapshot. A woman repeatedly pushing a sack-covered person into a pool. A young man with an innocent face standing nearby, smiling. Henry, Larry pointed at the man, her legal husband. And me? Just a joke. Now Stella understood his obsession with the V group. It wasn't just business. It was deeply personal, fueled by a burning grudge. So you want to ruin her, Stella stated, not questioned. Larry walked to the window, the moonlight casting a long shadow. I want her to know what it's like to have nothing. His fingers lightly grazing the pane. Lose the company, lose her reputation, lose. His voice trailed off. Stella stood behind him, making her presence known without touching. Revenge won't bring real peace, she said softly. Then what will? Larry turned abruptly, his eyes holding a dark fire. Forgiveness? Forgetting? He pulled down his pajama collar, revealing a brutal scar below his collarbone. She did this with an iron rod. 99 times. She counted clearly. Stella looked at the scar, then suddenly pulled him into a hug. Larry tensed for a moment, then seemed to collapse, drained, into her chest. I'm not trying to stop you, Stella said, her chin resting against him. I just don't want to see you consumed by hate. She gently held his deformed finger. These scars, they shouldn't define your life. Larry didn't answer, but Stella could feel the dampness spreading across her shirt. Outside, the eastern sky began to brighten. Stella watched Larry, finally at peace, in her arms and made a decision. Show me your plan, she said, all the details. Larry looked up, surprise flickering in his red, swollen eyes. If this can truly help you let go and start fresh, Stella wiped away his tears. I'll help you. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, Larry was explaining V Group's share structure to Stella, going over his acquisition strategy. His voice was still hoarse, but a clarity returned to his gaze. The sunlight catching on scattered papers, lighting up the soaked marriage certificate. Larry stared at it for a moment, then tossed it into the trash. Larry stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of LY Group's top floor, overlooking the city. His reflection appeared in the glass, holding a glass of red wine that swirled the deep crimson liquid, reminiscent of the blood he once lay in. An assistant knocked and entered, respectfully offering a file. Larry, V Group stock price dropped another 5%. The market's not favoring Victoria's recent decisions. Larry took the file, a cold smile on his lips. Good. He reviewed V Group's recent financial report, tapping a line of numbers. Victoria's already selling assets to cover the funds Henry misappropriated, he said. Keep selling our V Group bonds. He closed the file, voice calm. The assistant hesitated, but if V Group collapses too fast, we'll also lose on our investments. Larry looked up, a sharp glint in his eyes. I don't care. All he cared about was seeing Victoria slowly lose everything she once valued, just like he lost everything. In her office, Victoria stared at the computer screen as V Group stock plummeted. Shareholder calls flooded in, annoying her to the point of silence. Find out who's pulling the strings behind this, she said coldly to her assistant. The assistant's forehead was sweating. We checked. The funds are from a new investment company in Switzerland. It's got a deep background, but we can't find the actual person in control. Victoria frowned, then something clicked. Company name? Oh, what? She murmured the name repeatedly, seeming to realize something, her pupils trembling slightly. Larry. Her pupils suddenly contracted, and her fingers unconsciously gripped a pen tight, ink seeping through the document. Is it him? Is he back? Larry sat in a private room, across from V Group's former financial director, Bob. Bob rubbed his hands, eyes darting around. Larry, you promised me. Larry chuckled softly, sliding over a check. Here's the deposit. Once it's done, you'll get the rest. Bob greedily eyed the numbers on the check, nodding repeatedly. Don't worry, Victoria's trying to keep the stock price stable. She's about to mortgage core patents. If I just… No, Larry interrupted, his tone gentle but indisputable. I need you to help her. Bob stared, stunned. What? Help her stabilize the stock price. Make her think the crisis is over. He sipped his red wine, ice cold. Then, when she's most relaxed, strike. The next day, Victoria watched the suddenly stable stock prices. Her brow furrowed. We found out, the assistant reported. Bob contacted a few institutions to invest. Bob? Victoria was silent for a moment, then sneered. Where would he get the connections? The assistant shook his head. Not sure, but the funds are real. They've temporarily eased our pressure. Victoria walked to the window, the city lights bright against the night. Something felt off. Check. She turned around, her face not showing any relief from the stock price rebound. Find out which institutions Bob contacted. Quickly. Outside, the night felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. Larry took the document Stella handed him, glancing over with a small smile. Victoria's suspicious, as expected. Stella raised an eyebrow. Ready to pull the net? Not yet. He closed the document, looking out into the night sky. I want her to come to me personally, just like he once asked her to turn back. As it turned out, Victoria's instincts were spot on. As V Group stock price slowly stabilized, those institutions, as if on cue, withdrew their investments. V Group stock prices plummeted to a historic low. Victoria stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, her hands slowly tightening into fists. Her assistant dared not make a sound behind her. What about Bob? He's unreachable. With those words, the office was plunged into dead silence. The assistant couldn't wipe away the sweat from his forehead. He realized that revealing what he found might end his career. Were those institutions identified? They were. The assistant closed his eyes, placing the documents on the desk. Victoria, those investment institutions, they're all backed by different companies. But those companies, they all fall under LY. Victoria listened, surprisingly calm. Her intuition told her that LY was Larry. Larry was here for revenge. If that's how it is. Victoria stood beneath LY's company building, her suit slightly wrinkled, eyes tired and red. She'd been waiting here for 3 days. The reception politely yet coldly rejected her appointment requests, and security stopped her every attempt to force her way in. But she couldn't take it anymore. Move, her voice was low and dangerously calm. Before security could react, Victoria pushed her way past them, striding towards the elevator. Today, she had to see Larry. The door to the top floor office was flung open. Larry sat by the floor-to-ceiling window, back to her, a pen slicing sharply across a document. Victoria, he said, without looking back, his voice steady, trespassing in another's company. I can call the police. Victoria's breath hitched. That voice. She'd heard it countless times in her dreams. Now it was so close, yet cold like a stranger's. Larry, she rasped, taking a step forward. I know it's you. Larry finally turned around. The sun poured down behind him, outlining his tall silhouette. He's gotten even more handsome, but the guy who used to hold her and say he loved her seems like he's vanished. He corrects her, tapping the nameplate on his desk. Or you can call me Larry. Victoria's chest rises and falls heavily. I figured out Henry's deal, she says, stepping quickly forward and leaning on his desk. It was him. He orchestrated those dramas. He's been lying to me all along. I actually thought that thug was someone you sent to harm him. Larry looks at her silently, showing no emotion. Victoria's voice grows quieter. If I had known it was you, how could you what? Larry suddenly smiles. How could you push me off the high stage yourself? How could you break my ribs with an iron rod? Or maybe, How could you crush my fingers? He picks up a remote, pressing a button lightly. The office's projection screen slowly comes down, revealing a scene where a sack drops, exposing Larry's pale, bloodied face. And Victoria looks on coldly, with Henry standing behind her, a triumphant smirk on his lips. Then the scene with the iron rod falling, Larry curling up in pain with faint groans. Victoria's face turns ghostly pale. Want me to keep playing it? Larry rests his chin on his hand, speaking lightly. I got plenty more. Like the part where you hug Henry and have him call you hubby? Victoria is at a loss for words. She looks at his indifferent expression, then suddenly drops to her knees with a heavy thud. I'm sorry, she says, her voice trembling, fingers tightly grasping the edge of his desk. I really didn't know. Larry looks down at her, suddenly finding it funny. The once high and mighty executive Victoria is now kneeling before him, like a defeated stray dog. Victoria quickly shuts her eyes. After a long silence, Victoria raises her head. Larry, what will it take for you to forgive me? Larry takes a document from a drawer, sliding it across to her. V Group Equity Acquisition Agreement. Sign it, he says dispassionately. All your shares, I'll buy them at market value. Victoria is taken aback. You want V Group? No. Larry rises, the sound of heels clicking on marble echoing crisply. He leans down, lightly tapping the contract with his finger. What I want is for you to personally deliver V Group into my hands, he says with no pretense about his true intentions, and then watch it be destroyed piece by piece. Victoria's fingers tremble against the contract. She knows what this means. Handing it over would mean V Group's legacy will completely change hands. Not handing it over means she loses any chance of making things right with him. Watching her struggle, Larry suddenly becomes bored. I'll give you 3 days to think it over. He turns and walks toward the window, his back cold and distant. But remember, Victoria, he says without turning back, you are in no position to negotiate with me right now. In the penthouse conference room of V Group, the city lights are bright outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Larry sits at the head of the table, his fingers tapping the table, facing stacks of asset division agreements waiting to be signed. On either side of the table, high-level execs once groveling at Victoria's feet now sit with heads bowed, barely breathing lest they disturb his thoughts. Sell off the new energy department. Merge the medical division with Y Group, he announces, calm as if discussing the day's weather. As for the remaining shells, leave them be. The CFO cautiously asks Larry about the V Group brand. Larry looks up, a cold smile on his lips. V Group? He stands up slowly, his heels' sharp clicks on marble resonating like a warning bell in everyone's minds. There is no more V Group from today on, he says, tossing a final document to the silent woman at the end of the table. The document lands in front of Victoria, its cover reading position adjustment notice in bold letters. She's retained her CEO title, but all decision-making powers revoked, required to submit daily reports to Larry. Victoria stares at the document, her fingers twitching but not reaching for it. Larry watches her, then laughs suddenly. What? Victoria, not satisfied. The conference room is dead silent. Victoria raises her head slowly, those once hawk-like sharp eyes now lifeless, like they've lost all vitality. After a few seconds of silence, she finally picks up a pen and signs her name. Victoria, your daily report. The secretary places a file on her desk with a respectful tone, though sympathy leaks through their eyes. Victoria numbly flips it open. V Group Maintenance Progress Report. It details the number of times the company sign is polished daily, office plants being watered, the number of visitors at the reception desk 0. She closes her eyes briefly and signs her name. It's Larry's demand. She had to sign with her own hand to confirm she was seriously running this shell company every day. In the open-air cafe, Larry was carefully cutting the steak on his plate, the knife making a slight noise against the porcelain. Your steak-cutting skills are still so aggressive, Stella chuckled, reaching over to take his plate and naturally cutting it into small pieces for him, as if dissecting an enemy. Larry raised an eyebrow. Maybe it is. Stella pushed the plate back and lightly touched his hand. How does vengeance taste? Larry looked out at the lake, where sunlight scattered like a million pieces of gold foil. Emptier than I imagined, he said softly. Stella watched his profile and suddenly asked, "There's an astronomy exhibit tonight. Want to go?" "Astronomy exhibit?" "Yeah." She smiled slightly. "You once said you loved stargazing as a kid." Larry paused. He did say that long ago on a drunken night. He didn't expect her to remember. Under the planetarium's dome, Larry gazed up at the simulated galaxy slowly moving. Stella stood behind him, looking at his silhouette. "That's Altair from Aquila," she explained near his ear. "In legend, it can only meet Vega once a year." Larry chuckled. "Isn't that a tragedy? But at least they reunite every year." Stella's voice was gentle. "Isn't it?" Larry turned his head to look at her and suddenly noticed how her lashes appeared incredibly long under the blue light, like they were sprinkled with stardust. The space between them unknowingly grew smaller, closer. "Larry!" A hoarse shout came from behind them. Larry turned to see Victoria standing at the bottom of the steps, pale-faced, eyes bloodshot. She stared hard at their clasped hands, her chest heaving violently. "Who is she?" The hallway light in the planetarium was a cold, harsh white. Larry leaned against the wall, casually adjusting his cuff. "Victoria, do I need to remind you? Your behavior right now qualifies as stalking." Victoria's fists clenched, cracking with tension. "I asked you, who is SHE? Stella," he smiled slightly, "my partner, girlfriend, or future wife. Define it however you want." "Wife?" The word stabbed like a knife into Victoria's heart. She grabbed his wrist fiercely. "We aren't divorced yet." Larry looked down at her hand and unexpectedly laughed. "Divorced? Victoria, don't forget our marriage certificate is fake." He gently pulled his hand free and pulled out a document on his phone to show her. "Declaration of marriage nullity. Need me to remind you?" He leaned close to her ear, voice like a snake's hiss. "Your legal husband is in prison now." Victoria stumbled back a step, like all her strength had been drained. Stella stepped out of the shadows, one hand in her pocket, the other naturally hooked around Larry's arm. "Victoria," she said calmly, "if you keep harassing my boyfriend, I might file for a restraining order." Victoria stared at Stella's hand on Larry's arm and suddenly remembered years ago. Back then, she also declared before everyone under the cherry blossom tree at school, "Larry is mine. No one else can touch him." Now, the roles reversed. She was the one being warned, tasting the pain of a broken heart. On the way back, Larry stared at the rapidly receding scenery outside the window and suddenly spoke up. "Was I too cruel just now?" Stella kept one hand on the wheel, covering his hand with the other. "Compared to what she did to you, this isn't even interest." Larry looked down at their intertwined hands, suddenly realizing, somewhere along the way, revenge stopped being the only reason he kept going. The sunroof of the car slowly opened, revealing a sky full of stars. Stella's voice blended with the night breeze. "Look, Vega." For the first time, Larry tilted his head up and found that the night sky didn't make him feel lonely anymore. Not far behind them, Victoria stood in the shadows, glaring intently at where Larry and Stella sat. "Larry, you're doing this to hurt me, aren't you? You can't let me go either. Finding someone like this to make me beg?" Her eyes darkened with determination. Rain poured down, and the concrete ground in front of the V Group building gleamed under the downpour. Victoria knelt in the rain, her suit drenched, wet hair sticking to her forehead. Her knees sank deep into the water, yet she stubbornly lifted her head, eyes fixed on the window lit on the top floor. She knew Larry was there. Her voice hoarse but almost drowned by thunder. "Larry, please, see me one last time." The revolving door slowly opened, and a few security guards approached with black umbrellas. The lead guard sighed. "Victoria," Larry said, "if you keep this up, we'll have to take action." Victoria tugged at the corner of her mouth, rainwater dripping off her chin. "Then let him come and kick me out himself." The security guards glanced at each other, reluctantly picking up the walkie-talkie to check in. Whatever the response was on the other end, they looked hesitant before bringing out a bucket. In the next second, a bucket of ice-cold water poured down on Victoria, soaking her head. The cold cut right through her, making her lips turn colorless as she shivered uncontrollably. From the top floor window, Larry watched expressionlessly, tapping his Bluetooth earbud. "Victoria, you think playing the victim's gonna work on me?" His voice was clear and ruthless through the security's walkie-talkie. "When you broke my bones back then, I didn't get the chance to beg." The next morning, Victoria woke in her hotel suite to find her credit cards all frozen. Her phone buzzed non-stop with missed calls from her bank manager, the screen full of notifications. She called back, and the manager spoke in a serious tone. "Victoria, your personal accounts have been locked down by the international settlement systems, including your overseas trust funds." Her knuckles went white around her phone. Larry was pushing her to the edge. Without her assets and the V Group, she couldn't even afford the hotel room now. A dry laugh escaped her, raspy as sandpaper. "Larry, you're really leaving me with nothing." But Larry's revenge didn't stop there. During a company-wide meeting, Larry sat at the head of the table, fingers tapping rhythmically. "We've got something special today," he began with a smile, looking at the audience. "Let's welcome Victoria to read one of her commercial masterpieces." Victoria stood in the corner, pale, clutching a yellowed stack of papers. They were love letters she wrote to Larry at 18, full of youthful promises. "Read," Larry softly urged. "Let everyone appreciate Victoria's writing." Silence filled the room. Victoria's fingers trembled slightly as she opened the first page. "Larry, saw you in that white shirt today. My heart practically burst." Her voice cracked, struggling as she got to the third page. "Marry me when I'm 22. Love you forever, just you." Her voice was hoarse, but she finished all 20 pages. As she read the last line, the room was quiet enough to hear a pin drop, with a few teary-eyed female employees. Larry, however, kept smiling, even clapped at the end. "Brilliant performance," he commented. "Shame it was all lies." Victoria's head snapped up, something breaking in her gaze. The event stirred up talk inside the company. Stella barged in, slamming files on Larry's desk. The top paper was a medical report. "Victoria, severe depression, with symptoms of gastric bleeding. Take a look." Stella's voice was icy. "Keep going and she'll die." Larry glanced over it, fingers clenching around his coffee. He quickly composed himself, sipping indifferently. "So what?" Stella stared at him, laughing without warmth. "So what? Larry, when did you turn into this?" She stepped closer, her long fingers tapping the medical report with a dull thud. Taking everything wasn't enough? Having her grovel daily wasn't enough? Does she have to end up in the ICU? Larry's lashes fluttered, the cup hot against his palm. "I didn't push her." He met her eyes, cold and detached. "She brought it on herself." "Really?" Stella leaned in, caging him in his chair. "Then why won't you look at me?" Larry held his breath. Stella's voice dropped, carrying an inexplicable tone. "Larry, is it because you never really let her go?" The office was dead silent. Rain tapped on the glass, a somber countdown. Larry set down his coffee with a soft clink. "I haven't," he finally whispered, putting all his effort into those 3 words. Stella stayed close, her stare cutting. "Then why can't you admit you've gone too far?" Larry shot up, almost nose to nose with her. "Stella, you have no idea what I went through or what she—" "I know," Stella interrupted, her tone suddenly tender. "But the way you are now, isn't that what Victoria did to you back then?" The realization hit Larry like a blow. He staggered back, chest heaving. "Yeah, when did this happen?" His vengeance had turned him cold, methodical in her destruction, even relishing her unraveling. Wasn't this exactly what Victoria had done to him once? His voice broke. Stella sighed, brushing his cheek. "Hate burns long enough, it consumes you too." Larry closed his eyes, a tear slipping quietly down. Bang! The office door flew open, the secretary rushing in panicked. "Larry." Former V Group affiliates teamed up with 3 private equities for a hostile takeover of our stocks. He was instantly alert. "When did this start?" "Half an hour ago." The secretary handed him a tablet. "They've already secured 12% and are buying more." The screen showed an interview with the ex-V Group CFO, smiling chillingly. LY's acquisition methods were controversial. We're just restoring order, claiming what's ours. Larry clenched his fists, nails biting into his palms. Bob, the ex-finance chief he'd flipped, was now leading this. Set up a meeting, counter their moves, Larry ordered coldly. And trace their fund sources. No need, Stella cut in. Bob likely never switched sides to begin with. Larry whipped around. Meaning? Stella nodded, her gaze complicated. You thought he was V Group's man. More likely, he's on his own side. Larry's mind raced. In that case, this was much simpler than anticipated. He grabbed his coat. Get the car. I'm heading to V Group. Stella frowned. Where are you going? Without turning back, Larry replied, to find Victoria. Opening the door, Victoria stood by the window, appearing almost a shadow. Hearing him, she turned, surprise flickering before dissipating to nothingness. Well, look who's here. Her voice cracked. Here to check on your handiwork. Larry? He went straight to her, thrusting the tablet at her. Explain. Victoria glanced at the screen, frowning. I don't know about this. Bob's working for you. He used to be. She met his eyes steadily. Like how I used to be yours. Larry was breathless. They locked eyes for a moment. Then he inhaled deeply. I need you to fix this with me. She froze. Rain poured harder outside, streaking the glass like tears. Why? She whispered. He paused before giving an answer surprising even to himself. Because you're the only one who understands the former V Group inner workings. He wasn't admitting the whole truth. Half of V Group's old management was under him. But he wasn't ready to confess that seeing her medical report cracked something within him. Victoria studied him for a long time before softly laughing, exhausted yet at peace. All right. She pulled a file from her drawer and handed it over. Here's V Group's old network and leverage points. Enough for you to turn the tables. Larry scanned the document, pupils narrowing at its detail. Clearly wasn't prepared overnight. You anticipated this? Victoria didn't answer. She stepped to the coat rack, retrieved a blazer. Let's go. Before I forget how to be Victoria. Her posture straightened, a glimpse of her former sharpness. Maybe this was the last thing she could do for him. In the V Group conference room, Larry pushed the final documents across the long table. Your severance packages have been processed, he addressed the roomful of veteran employees. From today, there's no further link between you and V Group. The once CFO stuttered, but Larry, we've been with the company for 30 years, which is why you get double the compensation and leave with dignity. Larry's fingers drummed the table. Unlike Henry, who counts stitches on his face from a cell. The silence was immediate and deep. Corner of the room, Victoria hung her head low, her suit still carrying the dampness from a rainy night. She stayed silent the whole time, like a shell with all its soul hollowed out. Even after everyone else had left, Victoria remained seated, unmoved. Anything else? Larry asked, closing his folder. She suddenly reached out to hold down the files, her knuckles turning white. Is there really no chance for us at all? Larry focused on her hand. There was a fresh wound, a cut from the night before when she had shattered a mirror. He remembered the young Victoria, years ago, scaling a fence to bring him strawberries, her palms cut by the barbed wire, yet she smiled and said it didn't hurt. Do you know what I was thinking in that sack? He murmured. I was thinking, if you just turned around to look at me, just once. Victoria's pupils shrank violently. But you didn't. Larry pulled back his files, so my answer is no. Not even a little. Stella's words suddenly echoed in his mind. She'd said the best end to revenge is to forget completely. He turned to face the floor-to-ceiling window, the sunlight breaking through the clouds and casting a golden hue around him. A few days later, Larry received a video message from an unknown number. On the screen, Victoria kneeled on steep stone steps, her forehead pressed against the stones, bowing every 3 steps. Dark red traces of blood wound down the steps. Her knees were raw and bloody. It was at the temple where he had prayed for her beads years ago. The background voice belonged to an assistant, low enough just for Larry to hear. Victoria has been kneeling for 3 days. The abbot says she's praying. Delete it. Larry shut off the video. I don't need updates on her anymore. He walked over to the safe, retrieving a stock transfer document. After signing it, he paused, pulling out a sticky note. The pen hovered for a while before finally leaving 3 words. "To cleared." When Victoria received the file, she was lying in the temple's meditation room, burning with fever, feeling out of it. The abbot sighed as he handed her hot tea. Attachment harms both oneself and others. She tremblingly opened the file. The stock transfer dropped out, with the sticky note blown onto her heart by the draft through the window. In her daze, she remembered being 20 years old, Larry waiting for her in the snow, his nose red from the cold, smiling as he said, "Victoria, I finally got you." But now she'd lost him for good. Outside, the first snow of the winter quietly began to fall. Stella's car stopped in front of a pure white building on the city outskirts. "I wanted to show you after it was completed," she said, opening the car door and lightly tickling his palm with her fingertips. "But someone's been too busy with work to fit me in." Larry raised his eyebrows. "Is that a complaint?" "It's an accusation." She tilted her head and nibbled his ear. "You've ignored me for 3 days and 7 hours. Inside, the building was brightly lit, with a crystal plaque at the end of the hallway covered by a red cloth. Stella suddenly covered his eyes from behind. Count down from 3. In the darkness, he could hear the fabric falling. "Now look." The red cloth dropped to reveal a plaque labeled Trauma Medical Research Center, shining under the spotlight. "All profits will go toward researching trauma recovery," Stella whispered by his ear, "including those old injuries on your knees." Larry stared at the plaque, a lump in his throat. The scars from when he had kneeled for her prayers. She remembered them all. By coincidence or fate, the research center's lounge window faced the old V Group building. Larry was buried in data when he noticed a light moving across the ceiling. When he looked up, fluorescent blue letters appeared on the wall. "Larry, the kite's stuck in the tree." He froze. This was the secret phrase Victoria invented when she was 16. That day she broke her arm getting his kite but smiled, saying, "Don't cry, Larry, it doesn't hurt." On the rooftop of the opposite building, a slender figure leaned against the railing, a laser pointer still flickering. Even from across 100 yards, he knew it was Victoria. She wore the school jacket from when they first met, like a stubborn ghost. The glow continued to move, forming new words. "This time, I'll catch you." Larry stared for 3 seconds, then abruptly rose to draw the curtains closed. As darkness enveloped the room, he called Stella. "Come to the lounge now," he heard himself say, unusually calm, "and bring the ring hidden in the second drawer of the locker room." He heard a soft clatter over the phone. "When did you know?" Stella's breath was quick and shaky. Larry traced the tiny slit of light peeking through the curtain, a smirk forming. "Last time when you sneaked to measure my ring size, you got chalk all over my hand." Across the street, the laser was persistently trying to pierce through the curtain, casting faint dots of light on the floor. He stepped on the light spot, hearing footsteps outside the door growing louder and more frantic. "Stella," he called her full name suddenly, "I need you to come in and propose to me right now." The door burst open. She was holding a velvet ring box, panting heavily but her eyes shining bright. The laser flickered one last defiant blink beneath his feet, then went out completely. Larry's wedding was almost just like he imagined back in the day, minus all the unnecessary frills. He held her hand and exchanged rings at an observatory on top of the Alps. Only a handful of close friends were there, and the sound of champagne glasses clinking mixed with the mountain breeze, crisp and clear like stars shattering. "I thought you'd want a grander wedding," Larry said, kissing her fingertips. Stella gazed at the Milky Way. Only someone who's been under the spotlight knows how precious quiet can be. A waiter came up with a mountain of gifts, one particular ebony box standing out. The moment Larry opened it, Stella felt his fingers twitch. It was a string of Buddhist beads that Victoria had once given to Henry. Now, they lay quietly on velvet inside, each sandalwood bead smooth from years of touch. The attached card had just 7 words. "This time, I wish you peace." Stella snatched the box and tossed it to her assistant. "Donate it to a temple." But Larry chuckled. wrapping the beads around the bouquet. Makes for a good cautionary tale too. In the secure psychiatric ward, the TV broadcast wedding news. Henry's bony fingers dug into the screen, nails splitting and bleeding, oblivious. "I'm the one who's her husband," he screamed, smashing a glass. "Look, I'm younger and better looking, right?" The guard watched coldly until Henry, exhausted, collapsed in a pool of his own blood, then dragged him back onto the bed like a rag doll. Patient 0487 had another episode. The nurse wrote in her log, "Self-harm incidents today." 7. Barely after she whispered that, Henry knocked a mirror off the table, screaming, "What is this? Who sent it? Who sent this?" His face, once much like Larry's, was now riddled with savage scars. His right eye barely shut. The guard stared at him indifferently. "Anonymous donation, you have to accept it per protocol." Henry clawed at his own face, drawing more blood. He recognized this mirror. On the frame was a line of tiny engraving. "Look at you now, who do you resemble?" Henry hurled the mirror against the wall, shattering it to pieces. Outside, a raven flew past the bars, cawing eerily like it was mocking him. In a temporary hospital in the African desert, Victoria was kneeling on the ground, dressing a child's wound. The intense sun had burned the back of her neck, and her once luxurious suits were swapped out for crumpled linen shirts. When a little boy shyly offered her a dirty candy, she was taken back to when Larry was 18. He always loved slipping strawberry candies into her textbooks. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, showing a news alert. "LY goes public today. Market value estimated to break 100 billion. As the lock screen lit up, the nurse was surprised to see the typically quiet doctor's phone wallpaper. A boy in a school uniform standing under cherry blossoms, smiling back. As the bell tolled, Stella set off fireworks on a rooftop in New York. "A gift for the IPO," she said, wrapping her arms around Larry from behind, resting her chin on his back. "How does it compare to the time Victoria rented out an entire amusement park?" He turned to kiss Stella. "Not even close. You're 10 times better." Fireworks burst above, illuminating Wall Street's ever-burning lights of desire.